The planet of Aloria had always been a place of peace. Its skies were tinted with soft lavender light, its seas shone with silver waves, and its mountains reached into the heavens like proud guardians of the land. For centuries, the people of Aloria lived in harmony with nature. They built homes carved into living trees, they walked among glowing rivers, and they raised children who sang songs of hope and wonder. Yet, among all their songs and stories, there was one tale that never seemed to fade no matter how much time passed. It was the story of a human. 200 years ago, before even the great-grandparents of the oldest living elders were born, a stranger had appeared on Aloria. He was not of their world. His skin was pale compared to theirs, his body lean and strong, and his eyes carried a quiet fire that none of them had ever seen before. He wore strange clothes, torn and battered as if he had survived storms of fire. In his hand he carried a weapon the people did not understand. It was a spear, but the end was broken, jagged and dull. Yet when he fought, that spear struck with more power than blades of steel. The story said that he came during a time of great war, when enemies had descended on Aloria and sought to enslave its people. The Alorians, who were peaceful by nature, had never fought battles before. Their hands were meant for farming and weaving, not for carrying blades. But this human stood in front of them and defended them as if they were his own. He fought until the enemy fled, leaving behind fear of his name. And then he vanished. No one knew where he had gone. Some said he returned to the stars. Others said he walked into the mountains and never came back. The story should have ended there, like all old tales do. But it didn't. From that time onward, children on Aloria began to draw him. No matter which village they came from, no matter if their parents told them the story or not, the drawings appeared again and again. A man with short hair, stern eyes, and a broken spear. His figure was carved into school walls, sketched on scraps of cloth, and painted on rocks beside streams. The drawings were always the same. Even when children were punished for drawing during their lessons, they would return the next day and make the same marks again. When teachers erased the drawings from stone walls, new ones appeared by the morning. The children could not explain why they drew him. They only said it felt like he belonged in their hands, as if their minds had been touched by something greater than memory. Generations passed, and still the human appeared. Elders who once laughed at the drawings when they were young grew silent as they grew old. Priests began to wonder if this was a message from the stars. Leaders called him the Watcher, for he seemed to be a figure who looked over their people even in times of peace. Some feared him, worrying that his image was a curse that would one day return. But most believed he was a protector who would come again when Aloria needed him most. The story turned into legend. The legend turned into faith. In the city of Salorin, a wide hall was built with walls covered in carvings of the human. Children who had never seen each other before made drawings that matched perfectly. His face, always the same. His broken spear, always in hand. His eyes, always sharp with purpose. One elder, named Myril, once said, "A memory this strong cannot be erased. It is not a memory of the past, but a message of the future." His words were repeated in homes across the planet, and so even after 2 centuries, the legend never died. On a quiet morning, a group of younglings played near the river of Karen. Their hands were wet with the shining silver water as they skipped stones and laughed. But as always, one child drifted away from the others. Her name was Nira. She was only 8 years old, with wide eyes that often gazed into the distance. While the others played, she knelt by a rock and began to draw with a stick dipped in mud. When the others came closer, they saw his face again. "The Watcher," one of them whispered. Nira tilted her head. "I don't know his name, but I see him in my dreams. He walks in fire, but he does not burn. He looks at me, and I feel safe." The children were quiet. They had heard this before. Each of them, in different nights, had dreamed of the same man. They never told their parents, for the dreams felt private, like secrets too heavy to explain. One boy, older than the rest, looked uneasy. But if he comes back, doesn't it mean something bad will happen? The elders say he only comes in times of danger. Nira pressed her hand on the muddy drawing. Maybe danger will come, but if he comes too, then maybe we won't be afraid. The words settled into their hearts like stones into water. Far away in the great library of Celerin, scrolls of history were being studied by a group of scholars. They had been tasked with understanding the truth of the legend. Their leader, Scholar Farron, had searched for years through every ancient text, but what frustrated him most was this. There were no records of a human ever arriving by ship, no sign of his birthplace, and no reason for him to appear. It is as if he came from nowhere, Farron told his students. He was here, then gone, and yet his image stays alive in ways no ordinary man could. Perhaps he is not a man at all. One young student asked, "Then what is he, teacher? A spirit?" Farron did not answer. He only stared at a drawing etched by a child that had been delivered to the library that morning. The drawing was so precise, so exact, that it seemed like the child had seen the human standing before them. A chill ran through him. As twilight fell on Eloria, families gathered around their homes, lighting small fires to keep warm. Parents told stories. Children listened with wide eyes, and the legend of the Watcher was spoken once again. But on this night, the words carried a weight none of them could explain. It was as if the air itself knew something was approaching. The lavender sky darkened into deep violet, and the mountains whispered with a wind that had not blown in many years. The people of Eloria had long forgotten what war felt like. They had forgotten the taste of fear. But the legend of the human was not forgotten. And in the hearts of children, the Watcher's face glowed brighter than the fires of their homes. They did not know it yet, but the time of peace was ending. Eloria's skies had always been alive with winged creatures, small and large, their songs carrying across the lavender air. But on that day, their voices were gone. The people noticed too late. Farmers working in the fields paused to look up, wondering why the sky was so still. Children playing by the river grew uneasy, their laughter fading into whispers. Elders sitting outside their homes felt the weight of the silence pressing into their bones. Then came the sound. A roar like thunder split the clouds, and fire rained down from the heavens. Ships, black and sharp like the teeth of a beast, broke through the sky. Their metal bodies glowed red with heat as they descended. They moved in formation, hundreds of them, blotting out the sun. Panic spread like wind across the land. The city of Celerin was the first to burn. The invaders came with no warning, no message, no demand. Their weapons tore through stone towers as if they were made of sand. Flames climbed into the sky. Families screamed as they ran into the streets. The peaceful people of Eloria, who had never built weapons strong enough to harm, could do nothing but flee. From the mountain villages, smoke could be seen rising into the heavens. From the river valleys, fire glowed on the horizon. No place was safe. The invaders showed no mercy. They were tall, armored beings with gray skin and helmets shaped like skulls. Their machines rolled across the streets, spitting fire and crushing homes beneath heavy wheels. They shouted in harsh voices, a language the Elorians could not understand. Some carried long weapons that spat bolts of light, burning holes through stone and soil. The Elorians, untrained for war, could only run. Mothers clutched their children. Fathers tried to shield their families with their bare hands. Elders stumbled, their voices drowned by the chaos. It was a nightmare the people had never imagined. In the village of Karen, the same children who once drew the Watcher sat hidden beneath a crumbling shelter. Nira, her small hands shaking, clutched the muddy drawing she had made earlier that day. Her eyes were wide with fear, but she whispered again and again, "He will come. He will come." The other children huddled close to her. Some cried. Others sat in silence, their hearts frozen. Outside they could hear the growl of machines and the crash of walls falling. One boy muttered bitterly, "The Watcher is only a story. He won't come." But Nira shook her head. "He always comes when there's fire. My dream showed me. The children clung to her words, though none dared to believe fully. Hope felt too fragile to hold. Meanwhile, deep inside Saloran, the council of elders gathered in the underground chamber. The chamber had been built centuries ago, during the time of the First War, though most believed it would never be needed again. The carved stone walls flickered with the light of torches, and the voices of the elders trembled with fear. "What do they want?" one elder asked, his voice breaking. "They do not want. They take," another replied bitterly. Scholar Farron, the man who had studied the legend of the human, stood among them. His face was pale as he listened to the reports of villages burned and cities falling. "We cannot fight them," he said. "Our armies are too weak. Our weapons are tools, not machines of war. We will be swept aside like dust." A younger elder pounded her fist on the table. "Then what hope do we have? Shall we surrender and beg for mercy?" Farron's eyes drifted toward the carved wall where the Watcher's figure had been etched long ago. His broken spear pointed upward, his stance defiant. For a moment, Farron felt as if the eyes of the carving looked back at him, steady and unyielding. "The legend says he comes when fire takes our home," Farron whispered. "Perhaps this is that time." The elders grew silent. They wanted to believe, but fear smothered their hope. The invasion spread faster than anyone imagined. Within days, nearly half of Eloria's great cities were in ruins. Forests burned, fields of silver grain were trampled by enemy machines, rivers turned black with ash. The invaders moved with precision. They struck at food stores, water supplies, and places of gathering. They wanted not just to conquer, but to break the spirit of the people. Families fled into the caves of the mountains, carrying whatever little they could. Yet even there, the invaders followed. Smoke seeped into the caves, and terrified children clutched their mothers' hands as they prayed for a miracle. And through all of this, the drawings continued. Wherever children hid, they still drew him. On the walls of caves with chalk stolen from schools, on scraps of burned wood, on the ground with their fingers, they drew the Watcher. Some elders scolded them, telling them to save their strength. But the drawings gave a strange kind of comfort. When children pressed the drawings into their parents' hands, many found themselves unable to throw them away. The Watcher's face spread across Eloria like a silent shield of hope. In the ruins of Saloran, flames lit up the night. Streets that once carried music and trade were now rivers of fire. Among the ashes, a young soldier named Kelrin dragged himself through the rubble. His armor was shattered, his weapon gone. He had been one of the few trained to defend the city, but he had seen his comrades fall in hours. As he stumbled past the broken hall of carvings, his eyes caught something through the smoke. On the half-burned wall, untouched by the fire, the face of the Watcher remained. Kelrin collapsed to his knees. His heart ached with despair, but as he stared at the carved figure, a strange calm entered him. "If you are real," he whispered, "if you are more than a dream, then come. Please. We need you." The wind shifted, carrying the crackle of flames and the cries of the dying. Yet beneath it there was something else, a sound too faint to be explained. A step. Kelrin turned, his breath catching. Through the smoke, a shadow moved. It was only a figure for now, tall and human-shaped, walking with steady purpose. Kelrin's eyes widened. His heart hammered in his chest. Could it be? Or was his mind, weakened by fear and exhaustion, playing tricks on him? The figure did not answer. It only walked closer, each step slow and unyielding, as though the fire itself could not touch it. Across Eloria, flames consumed everything. Families mourned, cities crumbled, and hope thinned like smoke in the wind. The invaders laughed, sure of their victory. To them, Eloria was already theirs. But in the shadows of the fire, whispers began to spread. Survivors spoke of a figure seen walking through ruins. Some said it was a soldier. Some said it was a spirit. Children, however, whispered the truth, with wide eyes and trembling voices. The Watcher is here. And though most had not yet seen him with their own eyes, the very possibility was enough to light a spark in the ashes of despair. For the first time since the skies burned, the people of Eloria dared to lift their heads in hope. The ruins of Celerin glowed like a sea of embers. Smoke curled into the lavender night, turning the once bright sky into a blanket of gray. Cries of the wounded echoed faintly from the streets, though most voices had already gone silent. The invaders marched through the city with heavy steps, their armor clanging like iron bells. To them, Celerin was already conquered. But in the heart of the fire, something stirred. Kelrin, the young soldier who had fallen among the rubble, struggled to lift his head. His body was weak, his strength nearly gone, yet his eyes remained fixed on the shadow that approached through the smoke. At first he thought it was a trick, his desperate mind showing him a ghost to comfort his dying breath. But as the figure drew nearer, Kelrin's doubt gave way to awe. The man was real. He looked exactly as the carvings and drawings had shown for centuries. His face was weathered but strong, his eyes steady as stone, his short hair dark with soot. His armor was plain, worn, and patched in places as if it had endured many battles. In his hand he carried a spear, broken at the tip, jagged like a wound. It seemed useless, yet when he held it, the weapon looked more powerful than the machines of the invaders. Kelrin's lips trembled. "The Watcher?" The man paused and looked at him. For a moment their eyes met. Kelrin felt something pass through him, like a weight lifting from his chest. It was not just strength or courage. It was the quiet assurance of someone who had faced countless storms and still stood unbroken. Without a word, the human turned his gaze toward the invaders. At the far end of the street, 2 armored soldiers of the enemy advanced, their weapons glowing with light. They laughed at the sight of a lone figure standing against them. To them, he was only a man with a broken spear, not worth the effort of fear. One raised his weapon and fired. The bolt of light split the smoke and struck directly at the human, but in a blur, the spear swung upward. The jagged end cut through the air, striking the bolt aside as though it were nothing more than a spark. The deflected blast smashed into a crumbling wall, showering the street with stone. The soldiers froze. Their laughter died. The human advanced with steady steps, not rushing, not faltering. The second soldier fired, sending another bolt toward him. Again the spear moved, precise and sure, turning the blast away. Then the man closed the distance. 1 strike. 2. The broken spear pierced through steel armor as if it were cloth. The first soldier fell, his weapon clattering against the stone. The second tried to back away, fear shaking his hands, but the human moved faster. A sweep of the spear sent him crashing to the ground. The street was silent again, except for the crackle of flames. Kelrin stared, his heart pounding. He had seen warriors fall in minutes before these enemies. Yet this lone man had cut them down as if they were nothing. It was no myth. The Watcher was real. Word of his return spread like wind through the ruins. Survivors hiding in basements whispered of a human walking through fire. Mothers comforted their children with the story that he was here at last. Old men, who had once laughed at the legend, now wept as they heard the reports. And the children, oh, the children, were not surprised. They simply nodded as if they had always known. In caves, in schools, in burned houses, they whispered, "He came, we drew him, and he came." In another part of the city, a group of invaders marched toward the last standing temple. They planned to burn it as they had burned everything else. But when they entered the courtyard, they found him waiting. The Watcher stood in the center, his broken spear in hand. Behind him, a group of frightened families huddled near the temple doors. The invaders shouted in their harsh tongue and raised their weapons. The human's eyes narrowed. When the first shot came, he moved. Not like an ordinary man, but like a memory brought to life. He ducked, spun, and struck, his spear deflecting blasts in every direction. The light of enemy fire lit up his figure like lightning in a storm. His armor cracked, his body shook with strain, yet he did not fall. Every movement carried the weight of centuries. It was as though he had fought this battle before in another time, and had returned only to repeat it. When the last invader fell, the families behind him sobbed with relief. The human did not speak, but he turned to them with a calm gaze. Slowly he reached out and lifted a child who had stumbled. He set the boy on his feet and gave the faintest nod. The families understood. He was here for them. The invaders soon noticed something was wrong. Their reports told of resistance where none should exist. Scouts sent into the city did not return. Entire squads were wiped out by what their commanders described as a lone warrior. Fear began to spread among them. They were conquerors, used to easy victories. But now, whispers of the Watcher reached even their ranks. Some refused to believe. Others grew uneasy, remembering the ancient warnings passed down from their own ancestors. Do not provoke the human who fights with a broken spear. Their commanders laughed at the superstition, but the fear in the soldiers' eyes was real. Meanwhile, Kelrin had gathered with other survivors in the lower ruins. He told them what he had seen with his own eyes. The human standing against fire, the spear cutting down armored soldiers. Some doubted him, but when others arrived with the same story, their doubt faded. They began to believe. And with belief came courage. Maybe we can fight, one whispered. We don't have weapons, another replied. Kelrin looked toward the sky where smoke still rose. We have him. For the first time since the invasion began, the people of Eloria began to resist, not with machines or powerful weapons, but with spirit. Small groups of survivors struck back, guided by the human's presence. He appeared at the front of battles, leading them with silent strength. He never shouted, never commanded, but his actions were enough to inspire. Wherever he walked, people followed. Children left drawings of him on the walls of ruined cities, marking the Yab, places where he had stood. These drawings became signs of safety. When survivors saw the mark of the Watcher, they knew hope still lived. Yet for all the strength he showed, questions remained. Who was he? How had he returned after 2 centuries without aging a single day? Why did he carry the same broken spear unchanged since the first war? The people did not know, but in their hearts, they did not need answers. What mattered was simple. The legend was no longer a story. It was alive, standing among them. And, as the fires of invasion spread, the Watcher's shadow grew longer. Everywhere the Watcher appeared, people who once cowered began to rise. His presence was not only in his spear or his skill, but in the way he stood. Calm, steady, unbroken. Even in the face of overwhelming armies, he looked like a mountain that could not be moved. The survivors had no machines, no great weapons, but they had him, and under his silent guidance they began to fight back. In the ruins of Siloran, Kelrin led a group of farmers and elders. Their hands, once soft from work in the fields, now gripped spears carved from fallen trees. They had no armor, only cloth wrapped around their bodies to shield them from the cold night air. But when they looked at the Watcher standing at their front, they no longer felt weak. He studied the streets, his eyes sharp and calculating. Then he gestured with his broken spear, pointing toward the shadows where enemy patrols passed. Kelrin swallowed his fear. We'll strike together, he told the others, repeating the Watcher's signal. Not before, not after. Together, the patrol came. 3 armored invaders, their heavy steps shaking the ground. The survivors pressed close, hearts pounding, until the Watcher moved. Like a spark to dry grass, the group charged. Their wooden spears could not pierce the armor of the invaders, but the Watcher struck first. His broken spear cracked against the enemy's weapon, sending it flying. He turned fast as a storm, striking another in the chest with such force that the giant soldier toppled backward. In that moment, the survivors leapt forward, pushing and pulling, dragging the enemies into the ruins where fire and stone hid them. It was not a perfect fight. Some stumbled, some panicked, but the sight of the Watcher in motion steadied them. Together they brought the invaders down. When the street was quiet again, the farmers looked at one another, breathing hard, and for the first time since the invasion began, they smiled. Kelrin whispered, "We can fight. We can win." The Watcher moved across the land, never staying long in one place. He appeared in burned villages, stood atop ruined towers, and walked through the deepest caves. Each time, He taught the people how to resist. He showed them how to move quietly, how to set traps, how to turn their tools into weapons. He never spoke many words, but his actions were lessons. Children carried messages across valleys, drawing his face on scraps of bark to signal where he had gone. Women sang songs at night, songs of courage, using the rhythm of the watchers, footsteps as their beat. Men who once feared to lift a hand now stood guard at the mouths of caves, spears in hand, waiting with pride. The invaders noticed. What they thought was a weak and broken people had become a storm. Ambushes cut down their patrols. Fires swallowed their camps. Resistance spread from one end of Eloria to the other, each spark lit by the Watcher's shadow. In the high mountains, the elders held council again. Smoke from burning forests filled the air outside, yet inside the cavern hall their voices were clear. Scholar Farron stood among them, his eyes bright despite his weariness. "The legend is true," he said firmly. "The human has returned. He fights with us." The elders murmured in disbelief, though many had already heard the same reports. "Why now?" one asked. "Why after 200 years?" Another elder leaned forward. "It does not matter. The people believe, and belief is strength." Farron nodded. "Then we must unite them. The Watcher cannot fight alone forever. If we rise as one, we may drive the invaders from our world." It was a bold idea, and one that filled the hall with nervous silence. But slowly the elders agreed. They would spread the call to every corner of Eloria. In the days that followed, small victories became larger ones. Survivors from scattered villages joined together, their numbers swelling. Farmers, craftsmen, singers, and even children stood side by side, carrying whatever tools they could turn into weapons. The Watchers stood at their head. One battle took place in the valley of Erlin, where the invaders had built a camp filled with stolen food and water. The people knew they could not survive the winter without those supplies, so guided by the Watcher, they struck at night. The sky was dark, the wind sharp, and every heart trembled with fear. But when the Watcher raised, his spear, all fear seemed to melt. He charged first, moving like lightning, his spear striking through the shadows. Behind him, the people surged forward, their voices echoing across the valley. The invaders, caught by surprise, tried to rally. Their weapons flashed, sending bolts of fire through the night. But the Watcher was everywhere, deflecting, striking, guiding the people as they fought. For every man who stumbled, he lifted another to stand again. For every cry of despair, he gave a spark of courage. By dawn, the camp was theirs. The supplies were saved. The people sang with joy, their voices rising like the morning sun. But the battles were not easy. For every victory, there was loss. Homes remained burned, forests remained ash, and families mourned those who could not be saved. The Watcher never celebrated, never rested. He carried the weight of each loss in his silent gaze. Yet he never faltered, never allowed despair to break him. Kelrin noticed it first. After one battle, as survivors cheered, he saw the Watcher sitting alone by a ruined wall, repairing his broken spear with his bare hands. His face was calm, but his eyes held a sadness too deep for words. Kelrin approached quietly. "Why do you fight for us?" he asked. The Watcher lifted his gaze. For a moment, Kelrin thought he would not answer. Then, in a voice low and steady, the human spoke. "Because I always have." That was all he said. But it was enough. As the days turned into weeks, the resistance grew into an army. Not an army of steel and machines, but of courage and unity. The invaders, once so certain of their victory, began to falter. Their commanders grew angry, their soldiers restless. Rumors spread among them that the human was not mortal, but a spirit who rose whenever Eloria was in danger. Some even refused to fight, fearing his broken spear more than their leader's punishment. The Watcher's legend was no longer just a story of the past. It was alive, breathing, shaping the future. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and painted the sky in gold, the people gathered in the valley. Survivors from every corner of the world stood together. Children held torches. Elders sang songs. Warriors raised their spears. At the center stood the Watcher. His figure, scarred, yet unyielding, glowed in the firelight. He lifted his broken spear, pointing it toward the horizon where the invaders' fortress loomed. This would be their greatest battle yet, the fight that would decide whether Eloria lived or fell. The people cheered, their voices echoing like thunder across the land. For the first time, they were not only survivors, they were warriors, and they would fight for their home, not alone, but together, with the Watcher at their side. The battle for survival had begun. On one side stood the people, farmers, singers, children grown too fast, and elders who should have been safe in their homes. They carried spears of wood, blades of stone, and courage that had been born in the fire of loss. At their center stood the Watcher, his broken spear glowing faintly in the light of dawn. On the other side rose the fortress of the invaders. Its walls were black and sharp, its towers spitting smoke, its gates heavy as mountains. Inside waited an army of conquerors, armed with weapons far stronger than anything the people could build. Their commanders sneered, certain that this would be the day they crushed the resistance once and for all. The sun lifted over the mountains, spilling gold across the battlefield. And with that light came the cry of the people. They charged. The invaders unleashed fire. Their weapons spat bolts that split the ground. Their machines rolled forward with wheels that crushed stone. The sky turned red with their fury, but the Watcher was already moving. He ran at the front, his broken spear cutting through the air. Every blast aimed at him struck the jagged tip and was turned aside. Every strike he made toppled an armored enemy. Around him the people followed, their fear swallowed by the sight of his unshakable figure. Kelran, once only a young soldier, fought at his side. His wooden spear snapped in the chaos, but he did not falter. He picked up a fallen enemy weapon and raised it high, shouting, "For Eloria!" The cry spread, echoing through the valley until every voice roared the same, "For Eloria!" The battle was no longer just survival. It was defiance. Inside the fortress, commanders barked orders, confused by the resistance's strength. "They are only farmers," one snarled. "They are nothing without machines." Yet the truth was clear. The Watcher's presence had turned them into more than warriors. He had turned them into a force that no fear could shatter. The invaders sent their strongest units. Giants of steel, armed with cannons, marched into the valley. Their shadows stretched across the battlefield, black against the light. The people trembled, but the Watcher did not. He lifted his broken spear, pointed it toward the giants, and charged. Alone, he leapt into their path, deflecting blasts that should have torn him apart. With each strike, sparks flew, metal shattered, and the giants stumbled. The people saw and believed. Together they swarmed, climbing the machines, pulling them down with ropes, striking at their joints until they fell. The giants roared one by one, collapsing like mountains broken by storms. The ground shook. The fortress walls cracked. The battle raged on. Hours passed. The sun crossed the sky, hidden at times by smoke, shining again when the people pushed forward. The fortress gates groaned under their assault. The invaders fought with fury, but their confidence had been shattered. They had expected easy prey, not a united world with a human legend leading them. At last, the Watcher reached the gates. His spear struck once, twice, 3 times. With each blow, the earth trembled. The jagged weapon, though broken, cut deeper than any blade. The final strike shattered the gate into pieces and the people surged inside. The fortress became a storm of battle. Corridors filled with smoke, chambers rang with cries of defiance. The invaders fought hard, but their spirits broke when they saw the Watcher standing in their halls. Some fled, others dropped their weapons. Even those who stood firm could not withstand him. By nightfall, the fortress was theirs. The people of Eloria stood among the ruins, their bodies weary, their hearts pounding. They had won. Against all odds, against fire and steel, they had survived. Kelran fell to his knees, tears mixing with ash on his face. Around him, children cheered, women embraced, and elders lifted their hands to the sky in thanks. For the first time in weeks, the lavender heavens were free of smoke. Stars shone like silver sparks watching over them. At the center of it all stood the Watcher. He was quiet, his eyes scanning the horizon, as if he already knew this was not the end. He raised his broken spear and the people roared with victory. Yet when the cheers faded and the fires burned low, they turned to find him gone. He had vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. Some said they saw him walking into the mountains, his figure swallowed by mist. Others claimed he had stepped into the sky itself, lifted by light. A few whispered that he still walked among them, hidden, watching until he was needed again. No one knew the truth, but the drawings did not stop. Months passed, and Eloria began to heal. Villages were rebuilt, fields planted again, rivers cleared of ash. Families returned to their homes, carrying the weight of loss but also the strength of survival. Children played once more in the streets, their laughter rising into the lavender sky, and everywhere on walls and stones, the Watcher's image appeared. Children who had not even been born during the war still drew him, exactly as he was. The face, the eyes, the broken spear. Elders told the story in temples and homes. Teachers spoke of him in schools. Families passed down the memory as if it were treasure. The Watcher had come when fire consumed their world, and he had given them more than survival. He had given them courage. Kelrin grew older, but he never forgot. He carried with him a piece of the fortress gate, broken by the Watcher's strike, as proof that he had truly been there. When children asked him what the human was like, he would smile softly and say, "He was not a god, he was not a ghost, he was a man, but he was the strongest man I have ever seen." His words spread, becoming part of the legend. Generations later, when peace once again covered Eloria, the drawings continued. No one told the children to make them, yet still they appeared. The Watcher's story never faded because the people knew one truth: legends do not die when they are remembered. And so, the human who had come from the stars, who had stood against fire, who had fought with a broken spear, lived on. Whenever children pressed their drawings into their parents' hands, the message was the same: he will come again.